Somewhere out there is a person making $90,000 a year who still feels broke. They've got a decent apartment, a car that's not embarrassing, subscriptions they barely remember signing up for. On paper, they're doing fine. But every month ends the same way. The money arrives, the money disappears, and somehow, their life still feels financially fragile, not poor, just exposed. One unexpected expense, one job change, one rough year in the economy, and suddenly the whole thing feels like it might wobble. Now here's the strange part. If you ask that person how much they make, they'd probably say something like, "Honestly, I'm doing all right." Because compared to their friends, their coworkers, their old classmates, their income actually looks pretty good, which raises an uncomfortable question. If the income is decent, why doesn't the wealth feel real? Why does the bank account still feel like it's on a treadmill? And more importantly, why is this happening to so many people who technically make good money? Because this isn't really about income. It's about something much quieter, a psychological trap that slowly convinces you that you're progressing financially, while your wealth barely moves. And the weird part? Most people don't even realize they're inside it. Not until years go by. Not until they look up and think, "Wait, where did all the money go?" But to understand why this happens, you have to look at a financial illusion that almost everyone buys into. And once you see it, you can't really unsee it. Idea 1, the income illusion. There's a moment in most careers where something interesting happens. You get your first real paycheck. Maybe it's your first proper job after university. Maybe it's a promotion. Maybe your salary jumps from something modest to something that actually feels adult. And suddenly, you start thinking differently about money. Not dramatically, just subtly. You upgrade a few things, nothing crazy. Maybe a nicer apartment, a better phone, flights that don't involve 3 layovers and a suspicious sandwich at 2 a.m. You tell yourself something reasonable. I worked hard. I deserve a slightly better life. And honestly, that's fair. But here's the quiet shift most people don't notice. Your income increased, but your lifestyle expanded to meet it immediately. Not 5 years later. Not after building wealth. Immediately. Almost automatically. Because humans are remarkably good at adapting upward. Give someone a raise, and within a few months that new income starts to feel normal. The nicer place becomes standard. The subscriptions feel essential. The weekend trips become routine, and the brain slowly resets its baseline. So now the same person who once lived on 40K starts feeling stretched at 85K. Not because they're reckless, but because their lifestyle quietly reorganized itself around their income. It's like pouring water into a glass that slowly grows larger. No matter how much you pour in, it never quite fills, which leads to a strange outcome. Your income climbs, your life improves, but your wealth barely changes. Because wealth doesn't grow from income alone. Wealth grows from the gap between what you earn and what you keep. And that gap is where things start to get uncomfortable. Because for a lot of people, the gap barely exists. But here's where it gets even more subtle. The real problem isn't just spending. It's something deeper. It's identity. And this is where many high-earning professionals quietly get stuck. Idea 2, the identity upgrade trap. When your income increases, something else often upgrades too. Your financial identity, not in spreadsheets, in your head. You start thinking of yourself as someone who can afford things, not recklessly, just comfortably. And this creates a strange social pressure, because once your lifestyle signals a certain level of success, downgrading feels like failure. Even if the upgrade never made financial sense. Let's say someone begins earning 6 figures. Suddenly certain choices feel expected. Living with roommates? Feels weird now. Flying economy for long flights? Maybe, but it stings a bit. Driving the same car you had 5 years ago? People start asking questions. None of these pressures are explicit. Nobody sits you down and says, "You must now inflate your lifestyle." But the signals are everywhere. Social media, colleagues, friends. Even subtle comments like, "Mate, you make good money now." And before long, the lifestyle begins matching the income. Not because it has to, but because it feels like it should. This is where the illusion becomes dangerous. Because your financial identity starts getting built around spending capability. Instead of wealth creation, you become someone who earns well, but not necessarily someone who builds wealth. And those are two very different identities. One looks impressive. The other creates freedom. And here's the uncomfortable moment many viewers recognize. Somewhere along the line, your income increased, but your financial habits never evolved with it. The spending scaled up. The investing stayed optional. The saving became whatever was left over, which, let's be honest, is rarely much. And that leads to a realization most people avoid thinking about. Because if saving only happens with leftover money, wealth will always grow slowly, or not at all. But there's another layer to this. A financial force that quietly eats into high incomes, without anyone noticing. And it has a name economists talk about all the time. Opportunity cost. Idea 3, the silent cost of lifestyle inflation. Opportunity cost sounds like a boring textbook concept, but in real life, it's brutally simple. Every dollar spent today is a dollar that can't work for you tomorrow. And for young professionals especially, tomorrow is where the real money is made. Because wealth isn't linear, it's exponential. Compound growth turns small decisions into massive outcomes over time. But here's the uncomfortable twist. Compound growth only works on money that stays invested, not money that gets spent on slightly nicer versions of the same life. Let's say someone spends an extra $700 a month upgrading their lifestyle. Better apartment, more dining out, nicer travel. Individually, none of these look reckless. But over 20 years, invested properly, that same $700 a month could quietly turn into hundreds of thousands of dollars. Possibly more. Not through genius investing, just time. This is the quiet tax of lifestyle inflation. You don't feel it immediately. Your life actually feels better, more comfortable, more convenient, more adult. But behind the scenes, those extra dollars never enter the one system designed to create wealth, long-term investment. And here's the psychological trick. The lifestyle upgrades feel permanent. The missed investments feel invisible. Nobody sees the future portfolio you didn't build. No one compliments the retirement account you never funded. But everyone sees the new car, the nicer apartment, the upgraded life. So socially, the reward structure favors spending, not investing. And that creates a strange situation. You can earn more money than your parents ever did, and still feel financially uncertain, because income is visible, but wealth is quiet, which leads to one final realization most people encounter later than they'd like. The real difference between people who feel financially secure and people who always feel slightly stressed isn't their salary, it's the system they built around it. Idea 4, the system problem. Most people treat saving and investing like a decision they make every month. If there's money left, I'll invest some, which sounds responsible. But in reality, it's fragile, because life always finds a reason to spend the leftover money. Something breaks, a trip comes up, a friend gets married in another country, a new gadget releases that feels oddly essential, and suddenly the leftover money disappears. Month after month, year after year. Meanwhile, the people who quietly build wealth do something different. They remove the decision entirely. They build a system. Money flows automatically. Investments happen without debate. Their lifestyle expands only after wealth systems are funded, not before, which flips the equation most people follow. Instead of income, lifestyle, maybe saving, they follow income, investing, lifestyle with what remains. It's not dramatic. It's not exciting. It's actually a little boring. But over 10 or 15 years, that boring system creates something most high earners secretly want. Stability. Not just a big paycheck, real financial breathing room. And this is the moment where the income illusion starts to fade. Because you realize something slightly uncomfortable. High income doesn't guarantee wealth, but disciplined systems almost always create it, even with moderate income. Which brings us to the quiet shift that changes everything. At some point, everyone who builds wealth experiences the same mental shift. They stop asking, "How much money do I make?" and start asking something much more powerful. How much of my life is financially protected? Because income is temporary. Jobs change. Industries shift. Economies wobble. But wealth, real wealth, buys something different. Time. Time to make decisions without panic. Time to walk away from work that drains you. Time to choose the life you actually want. And ironically, most people don't need dramatically higher income to start building that. They just need to stop treating income as proof of financial success. Because income is loud. It shows up every 2 weeks. It feels like progress. But wealth builds quietly in the background. Slowly, patiently, often unnoticed. Until one day something strange happens. You realize your expenses are covered by investments. Your choices feel wider. Your stress levels lower. Your relationship with money calmer. Not because you chased income harder, but because you designed a system that turned income into wealth. And once you understand that difference, you start seeing financial decisions differently, not as purchases, but as trade-offs with your future freedom. Which leads to a simple but powerful question worth sitting with for a moment. If your income disappeared tomorrow, how long would your current lifestyle survive? A week? A few months? A year? Most people avoid asking that, but the answer tells you something incredibly important about where you stand financially, not your salary, your resilience. And once you start thinking that way, something interesting happens. You begin valuing wealth signals over income signals, quiet investments, growing assets, systems that run automatically, things that don't look flashy, but steadily build freedom. And if there's one financial habit that separates people who feel wealthy from people who just look wealthy, it's this. They stop designing their life around what their income can support today and start designing it around what their wealth can support tomorrow. It's a slower game, but it's a far more powerful one. And once you notice this shift, you start seeing something else everywhere. People who look successful, but feel financially stretched. Nice lifestyle, strong income, but very little actual wealth. Because building wealth and looking wealthy are two completely different games. And most people don't realize they're playing the wrong one. So if this idea stuck with you, the next video you should watch is about something even more subtle. It explains the hidden psychological pressure that pushes people into spending more than they realize, and why trying to look successful can quietly destroy your long-term wealth. Tap the video on screen. It's called The Invisible Cost of Looking Successful. Once you see that trap, you'll start thinking about money in a completely different way. And honestly, that realization alone can change your financial future.